Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're watching this from, and welcome back to our Partnerships and Deal-Making Day at the LSX World Congress. Delighted now to be hosting this keynote session live, and a big thank you to Sue joining us late in her evening from Singapore, and Monika early in her morning from the US, and Clive and Sean for making this sort of truly global panel happen on such an important topic, and one that I'm sure is going to stimulate a lot of questions and debate from the audience. Please do put those questions and any comments in the Q&A functions to the right-hand side of the video here. We'll get to as many of the questions as we can throughout the discussion. But yes, the title of this is Partnerships Against the Pandemic, and delighted to be joined by some of those leading the charge in a number of the vaccinations for COVID-19. But without further ado, I'll hand over to our moderator for the session, Clive Cookson. Clive, the stage is yours.
Thanks very much indeed, Josh. I'm very much looking forward to the next 45 minutes. And this is not going to be us chatting at the beginning and then taking questions from the audience afterwards. Please fire the questions in. I found at previous conference sessions, audience questions are always better than the ones I was thinking of asking, so don't hold back. Our panelists are Su-Peing, who is the VP and Global Medical Head and COVID-19 Vaccines Taskforce Leader for Sanofi Pasteur, Sean Marett, who's Chief Business Officer for BioNTech, and we have Monika Vnuk, Vice President for Worldwide Business Development for Pfizer. We're going to be concentrating on partnerships, at least at the beginning of our discussion, how companies have come together and are working together to fight the pandemic, in particular on vaccines. We may later get onto sort of more technical questions about efficacy, etc. But I do want to stick to working together. We're going to be talking, for example, about how these partnerships came about, how they were agreed, how they were structured to speed ahead at record pace, what the challenges were, what good things came out, what bad things came out, and lessons for the future. I'm sure this has changed working within biotech and pharma forever. What if normality ever returns? We'll learn a lot of lessons. Sean, can I ask you to start, please? Very brief introduction of yourself, and then how you have found the partnership with Pfizer in particular.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sean Marett. I'm on the board of BioNTech since, coming up to 9 years now, and responsible for business and commercial activities in the company. And our partner, we have two actually. We've got one in China, Cookson Pharma, and outside of China, one which is, of course, Pfizer. And the Pfizer collaboration really came about because we already had an existing collaboration in 2018 on flu using mRNA. So when we started our project at the end of January, we knew that should we be successful, we needed quite a strong distribution partner, but also someone who had tremendous clinical operations expertise and reach in order to develop a vaccine quickly. And you know, we've known Pfizer colleagues for a couple of years, and it was an obvious choice for us to call them and say, we're going to develop this program. We've already got constructs in the that we've manufactured, ready to go into clinical trials. Should we get together?
And
we did.
And you did. And how's it gone? I'm going to turn to Monika in a moment, but just give us an overview of how it's, obviously from point of view of the outside world and the number of doses you're delivering. It looks like it's going really well, but tell us a little bit about how it's going before I turn to Monika.
Yeah, so I think for both companies, it of course has thrown us in at the deep end, because we were having to develop something which typically, the typical vaccine life cycle is 12 years, perhaps a little bit more. Develop something with the stated goal of having something approved within a year. And originally the idea was 8 to 9 months. And so this, with a technology where there was no global manufacturing footprint, there is no mRNA anywhere in the world, or was at that point, from a product perspective, a regulatory perspective. And so for both of us, it was, a baptism by fire.
Yes.
One, we had a very large organization, Pfizer, and then us as a small organization without all of the expertise that Pfizer could offer. And it was the synthesis of those two that I think makes the collaboration extremely successful. And one thing that I would say is that this gets our colleagues in Pfizer the attention of the CEO of Pfizer, Albert, and there we have quite regular interchange with Albert and the executive team, because obviously this is a global challenge and an important priority for all of us.
Okay, that is an excellent moment for me to ask Monika Vnuk to pick it up from Pfizer's point of view. Monika, give us a very, very quick introduction of your role, and then tell us, please, how the collaboration is going.
Great. No, thank you. Pleasure to be here. And Monika Vnuk, I had an organization at Pfizer in our business development department that is responsible for all of Pfizer's preclinical business development transactions. So my team and I partner with biotechs around the world, as well as academics, to bring in preclinical substrate into Pfizer. So I'll circle back a little bit to the deal itself and kind of how it came about in a short period of time. I want to echo some of the themes that Sean mentioned. Yes, we had a head start. All of you might wonder how it all came together so quickly, not just the vaccine, but the deal itself. We already knew each other as two organizations. As Sean said, we started working together in 2018 using the same technology, the mRNA technology, to collaborate on flu. So our scientific teams knew each other well. And the deal team knew each other from those negotiations in 2018. They met in person, they had interactions, except for me. I was actually the new team member, so I didn't get to meet Sean back in 2018. And actually, when we were doing the deal back in March of 2020, we were never on camera. We did the deal in less than 30 days, all by phone. And it was an excellent experience. And what I would say is, we had this head start. The existing relationship provided us the foundation of trust, which is essential for getting deals done. And then I would point to what I call kind of 4 key factors that made the deal go so quickly, but also allows the partnership to continue to flourish and resulted in a successful vaccine. So the 4 factors I would point us to is the focus. So we accomplish what we focus on. And at the time of doing the deal, we were, at least the deal teams were completely singularly focused on getting the deal done. it wasn't just a focus limited to the deal team. Again, a theme that Sean brought up is the attention of our executives. Yes, we have Albert's attention now, but the attention started really back in February and March, and we had access to decision makers anytime we needed them, which allowed for the deal to progress very quickly. The other factor I would point to is creativity and flexibility. I think both sides approached the deal very pragmatically. We looked to design deal terms that were flexible, that were pragmatic, that were designed to move forward the science and the development and to leverage each other's strengths. The third element, I would say, which is actually essential for getting the vaccine developed itself, is we were doing and continue to do things in parallel rather than sequentially. So from a deal perspective, we were, I would say, building the ship as the scientists were already setting the sail. We were negotiating the broader collaboration agreement, but we already had in place a letter of intent and a material transfer agreement, and that allowed the scientists to start working on those candidates that Sean mentioned as we were still negotiating the agreement. And last but not least, I want to point us to an element of expertise. I think what allowed our industry in general to put forth vaccines into the clinic and obviously into the arms of humanity so quickly is the expertise that our industry has. So from a deal perspective, both BioNTech and Pfizer have excellent business development teams who comprise individuals with a lot of expertise, both business development as well as legal teams. And we have the scientific, clinical, manufacturing, and commercial experts to bring the vaccines forward. And I just want to underscore that expertise is essential to save lives. And I think as society, we need to continue to invest in expertise. So I'll stop there and I can come back to other themes.
Thank you very much, Monika. Su-Peing from Sanofi, your collaboration with GSK on the COVID-19 vaccine didn't go as well, unfortunately, as the BioNTech Pfizer one. And we don't have anyone from GSK to put their side. Tell us how it's gone, what a bit about how it came together, how you've worked together, how you decided to suspend things.
Thanks, Clive. I'm Su-Peing, Global Medical Head for Sanofi Pasteur for vaccines, and also the COVID-19 vaccines Taskforce leader. And of course, although my GSK counterpart couldn't be here this evening, it was definitely certainly something we have discussed previously, and he was very comfortable with me representing our partnership for this particular panel. I think, first of all, GSK and Sanofi Pasteur, we're no strangers to forming partnerships as well. We are also no strangers to infectious diseases, and public health mission is very, very much part of our DNA. And so, of course, at the outset of the pandemic, we all recognize the grave importance of coming together and of the grave need for speed as well, and that this was going to be a race against the virus and not a race amongst companies or institutions. And so I think it was certainly with that sense of mission and that sense of purpose, that the collaboration really could be founded. And for us, it started, of course, with some work that we already been doing with the US government, so with the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Agency, or the authority called BARDA. And we'd already been working on developing constructs for phase 1 testing. And we knew that for our protein, recombinant protein platform, which has been already widely used in influenza, we had experience with this platform for pandemic influenza. We recognized that it would need an adjuvant to boost the immune response of this particular technology. At the same time, GSK had also been indicating that they were willing to partner their adjuvant platform, which is the AS03 platform, also widely used during the previous influenza pandemic. And they'd already started to discuss partnerships with different companies. So of course it was, here we had two mutually complementary technologies that could be brought together. And for this particular purpose, it was really phone calls, as I think, you know, all of this took place in a time when most of us were in lockdowns, phone calls between CEOs that quickly materialized into leadership team meetings between the two companies. And similar to the picture that Monika portrayed as well, a lot of work going on with, you know, a letter of intents, with material transfer agreements, while we were still formulating the collaborative agreement itself. And that, of course, then expanded from the initial effort, which was going to be mainly with just progressing phase 1 with BARDA, into a much bigger agreement with the US government to try to actually bring the candidate all the way through to development, and then to supply actual vaccine to the US government. So this partnership has been, you know, basically, you know, formed with, as we said before, mutually complementary technologies, and a really a strong sense of purpose, and a strong sense that, you know, not one vaccine can make it. We really need as many shots on goal as possible and as many vaccines as possible to be able to immunize the whole world for the pandemic to ultimately be brought under control.
And so the decision you jointly came to in December to sort of delay things because you weren't getting as good immune response in older people as you'd hoped. Was that a difficult decision to make together? To tell us a bit about that.
So we're both very science-based, of course, very driven by the data, and we also believe very much in doing the right thing. You know, so the data were disappointing, right? But it gave us a clear indication that we can mount an immune response. We clearly didn't have the optimal formulation, and we had identified the root cause. So with that in mind, you know, we agreed that there is a clear path forward. There is still an immense need. Yes, we have a setback, but because the need is still there, and of course our external partners were still very keen to see us progress, we never looked back. So we both doubled down and said, okay, we put our teams together. Let's make sure we put all the best brains together if we can leapfrog anything that this setback has resulted in, if we can, and make sure that we get ourselves back on track. Unfortunately, that has certainly paid off, and we've solved the formulation issues, and we are aiming to get back into the clinic this month.
Will it be possible to do extensive phase 3 clinical trials when you've already got products on the market?
Yes, we recognize that we have to look into the ethical aspects of running clinical trials. However, it's fair to say that there's still not enough vaccine. Not every country in the world has got enough vaccine. There's still, a significant toll that the virus is creating in many different countries. So there are still countries around the world where it is still possible to demonstrate efficacy, and we intend to make sure that we go with speed so that we can actually reach that goal.
Okay, that's fair enough. Questions are beginning to come in. I urge you in the audience to bring them forward. Let me ask Monika, meanwhile, what, beyond your sort of headline partnership with BioNTech, what other important partnerships have you reached during the COVID crisis to fight the pandemic, whether on vaccines or on therapeutics?
So I think your question is partnerships for COVID. I
Yes.
think, I'll just point to that, in parallel to working on COVID, we did not stop working on partnerships more broadly. So we actually, right around the same time as we were entering and starting to work on COVID with BioNTech, we did another vaccine partnership with a European company as well, Valneva, for a vaccine for Lyme disease. That's not a COVID partnership, but we continued to work as a business development organization, including on vaccines and other areas. In terms of COVID partnerships, we have looked very extensively at what we will need both with BioNTech, what we will need to support the partnership and the platform. So our scientists have been looking at complementary supportive technologies. We had done many, material transfer agreements and evaluation agreements with academia, mostly focused actually on our protease inhibitor or the molecules that we had screened previously for the previous SARS and MERS pandemics. About a decade ago, we looked at that library and looked to screen those molecules against COVID. So the organization has been very focused on trying to put forth not just vaccine solutions, but potentially therapeutic solutions. And for the COVID partnership with BioNTech, both sides have been working extensively on supporting our manufacturing capabilities and securing raw materials that are needed for production of the vaccine. And maybe Sean wants to make some comments about how we're working in terms of supporting the needs of the collaboration.
Yes,
but I hope that answers your question.
It does, Monika, and it actually feeds into one of the questions from the audience, from Chloe Selwood. She'd like each speaker to talk about how the excellent partnerships that you've talked about will continue, particularly when the pressure from the pandemic abates. I've got some more specific questions about how they work. But Sean, how would you see your partnership carrying on if and when the pressure begins to relax?
Well, we've got the flu partnership with
yes,
with our colleagues, and I think that our colleagues at Pfizer talked about that yesterday in their financial release, that we will be working on that to try and get a flu vaccine on the market before 2025, which again, if you think about it, we're not yet in the clinical phase. It's not too far away relative to vaccine cycles, and I think that's one of the benefits of the mRNA COVID vaccine that we've developed together. That there is now for all regulators some experience with this approach, which should be able to assist us in future products, and that's in 4 years. And I think that I think it's actually quite good. Maybe Monika and Su-Peing might disagree with this, but I actually think it's quite good that we do these things quite quickly, because it just shows you what you can do with development cycles for very promising drugs. And that, in my view, I can't see why we can't repeat that. It may not be in 9 months or 10 months, but, you know, as a model, that wouldn't be such a bad thing.
I agree. Su-Peing, would you like to pick that up and tell us how you see things carrying on when some of the pressure abates?
Well, to be honest, I mean, our specific collaboration with GSK is around pandemic vaccines. So it is very much structured around these this immediate public health goal. So, you know, of course, we're still have to watch and learn from the evolving epidemic as to whether or not this turns out to be more of a seasonal type of disease that comes back, and we need to again continue to assess what that situation looks like, and of course then we would by then have generated a significant amount of clinical data, and so of course I would expect that we continue to have a dialogue with GSK as to what would be the next steps should the need continue beyond the pandemic. But certainly I would like to also pick up on Sean's point, because in many ways I think it's really important that that what we've learned from the speed with which we can actually get vaccine development, you know, to really solve these challenges. If we can indeed replicate some of the collaboration, which isn't just between companies, but it's also with the academic community and also with the regulators, I think that would enable us to really bring innovation much more rapidly and then solve more of the challenges, the unmet needs much more rapidly. And that certainly is something we would welcome.
Monika, I'll bring this question back to you in terms of how some of the good practices you've developed can carry on after the pressure abates.
Sure, happy to. And you know, personally, I do look forward to the pressure abating a little bit, because you know, I don't want us to miss or underestimate the human element here. So yes, we have achieved a tremendous amount in the past 10 months. We have brought vaccines onto the market in less than a year from starting in the clinic. And as I said, you know, it required doing things in parallel rather than sequentially. So, you know, let me come back to the human element. What do I mean about that? You know, it worked well. We have an approved and highly efficacious vaccine, and we're able to manufacture it for the benefit of humanity. But we should not forget that required a vast amount of people, a vast team, to put aside everything else to get this result. And that means, you know, putting aside often, you know, time with family. And we should not overlook that. So, you know, when we think about what were the challenges, I would say, you know, the sacrifice that everybody had to make and continues to make. On the positive, you know, let me get back to, you know, some of the factors that I mentioned, the flexibility and creativity. You know, that's not a new element, but I think, again, it underscores the importance of being flexible in deal making, and we do deals quickly, routinely. This is not the first deal that came together very quickly. In terms of, you know, developing products so quickly, I think it's the focus and the willingness to take risk, to invest in, for example, you know, vast manufacturing capabilities before you know if you have even proof of concept in the clinic. That requires courage, that requires vision. And I, you know, the credit really goes in this case to our Albert Bourla and Ugur Sahin, both CEOs of the companies, Albert made the executive decision to put a lot of Pfizer resources at risk. We didn't take any government funding. And, I won't speak for Sean, but I think I've heard him and Ugur said many times that, investing the human resources of BioNTech into this vaccine, presented some risk for the company at large, and they were willing to do it. So it's the courage of our executives and the sacrifice of the teams that it took to get us here. And I think the lesson learned is, it takes courage, it takes focus, and when we have those, we can achieve a lot that we were not, aware that we could achieve. What's your take?
Sorry, sorry, Monika, you're asking Sean.
Yeah, I think it would be good to hear from Sean on this question as well, if you don't mind, Clive. Sorry for taking over.
Yeah.
I just echo what Monika said. For Pfizer, as a large company, taking these kind of risks, as Monika said, and building manufacturing without knowing if an experimental technology, which has never seen the light of day from a product perspective, was tremendously courageous. And we decided, I remember we decided in early January to focus the company on this. And as a board, we made that decision. And there was some risk there too. But at the end of the day, we really did see the possibility that this could really work, and we were prepared to put a bet on that. We did.
Right. There's a question which brings the three of your companies together from Bertrand Delsuc. Could you provide some color on how Sanofi came to help BioNTech to fill and finish for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine? How Sanofi negotiated access to some of your infrastructure for them. We'd like to start on that. Su-Peing?
I'm happy to start. I think, we're pleased to have been able to make the announcement last week. And really, since the onset of the pandemic, Paul Hudson, our CEO, has always strived to say that, we want to do the right thing. We want to do things right. And we knew that there was unprecedented need for vaccines in Europe. And we have infrastructure and expertise that was available, and therefore were able to come to an agreement with BioNTech to produce over 125 million doses of the vaccine in Europe. And we feel that that's the right thing to do, because we can help to protect lives, and then we continue to remain true to our commitment to public health and this collective goal that we all have to get as many vaccines as possible to people who need them. At the same time, we of course will still continue to focus on our other vaccine development. So these are complementary efforts. They're not taking away from the ongoing vaccine efforts. And so, this makes complete sense to us to contribute wherever we can.
How quickly was that decided? The questioner asked for some color. Maybe Sean can provide some color on that if you were involved in that agreement and announcement.
Well, so Sanofi's a collaborator of ours since 2015. Actually, Sanofi contacted us, and said, we've got this capacity in Frankfurt. It's a high-speed line. Do you want to use it? And we said, yeah, sure. And we got talking pretty quickly, and agreed a letter of intent in 48 hours. Actually, a bit like Pfizer. I mean, with Monika, we did the letter really quickly as well. Do you remember, Monika? The letter of intent was super quick, and then the contract was probably the quickest pharmaceutical contract I've ever done with a pharma company.
Oh yeah, no, I remember.
That was quick.
Was Pfizer involved in the agreement that Su-Peing and Sean were just talking about?
No. That was yeah. We've got our own manufacturing, as you know, Clive.
Yes. Yes.
We're in Mainz, and Frankfurt down the road. It's all kind of we all know each other, and it really was personal relationships that led to that, as is quite often the case.
Right. Okay. A question from Mark Paul, who's asking whether there's anything in the difference between a partnership between two pharma giants and a partnership between a pharma giant and a smaller biotech. I suspect the answer is going to be no, but might one generalize that partnerships work best when the partners have very different size, stroke reach, stroke resources, stroke expertise? Or is it really just a question of the science, the technology?
Yeah, if I may, I mean, in terms of what led to the delay, it's got nothing to do with partnership. It was really the science. And we're no strangers to partnering with large and small companies as well, both on drugs, but also on vaccines. And in fact, we've had successful vaccines developed in partnership with Merck, and also in a partnership with AstraZeneca for a preventive immunotherapy for preventing RSV, which is a respiratory syncytial virus. So definitely, I would not say that size matters in this case. I think it comes down to some of the factors that Monika had raised in terms of the technology, the assets, the mutual aspirations, the trust that you can build, and the belief that together we can actually do it faster, quicker, and achieve more than separately.
Yes. I'd like to ask about how, as partners, you handle your negotiations with governments and customers for these products, particularly since that's obviously politically a very charged field. Do you do that together, or does one or other partner decide that they're going to deal with one customer or government, another with another? I don't know if you can give a flavour of that. Sean, perhaps start off.
Yeah, I think it depends on the country. So our colleagues at Pfizer took care of the US government contract. We in Europe have been active with the UK, with the European Union. We've also been active with in Canada. So it very much depends on the country. And actually in Singapore, it was a joint effort too. So it depends, and a lot of this is driven by the relationships and the strength of those relationships in those negotiations.
Su-Peing?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's the same. In some instances, it's both of us with the government, and in other instances, we both agree one of us would be the lead, and we, as long as we've agreed up front who's going to do what, I think that makes it quite straightforward going ahead.
Now, it's an interesting question just come in from someone whose name I don't have. Now that your companies and many others in the pharma and biotech sector are household names, have become household names in a positive light, Has this changed anything for you and the wider industry going forward? Generally good publicity that the industry has received through the pandemic. What difference is that going to make? How can you build on it? Monika, why don't you start answering that question?
Sure. Yes. No. We are, you know, a significant part of the solution to the crisis that, you know, we all face. This is a tremendous public health and economic crisis, and as we have been talking throughout this panel, it took a lot of courage, it took a lot of investment, and it took a lot of expertise. And I think, you know, it's very satisfying and rewarding to, you know, be stopped in the supermarket or in the street and be told thank you. I see your T-shirt. You're with Pfizer. We want to thank you. I'm sure the other panelists, if they, you know, wear a BioNTech coat somewhere in Germany, I'm sure that they get the same kind of recognition. I think, you know, I'll again go back to my comment about expertise. I think we have to recognize that expertise saves lives. We need to continue the investment in supporting innovation, and I hope that this example of the industry coming together and being a key solution to a crisis that faces us all as a humanity underscores the importance of innovation and this industry to all of us.
It's nice, Monika, that you're feeling this personally. Sue, are you?
Well, of course, we're not in the same situation as Pfizer and BioNTech to have brought a vaccine, but we certainly, you know, as a Sanofi, we're of course supplying essential medicines and vaccines for, you know, to ensure that there's continuity of care. And many of our medicines and vaccines are still really much needed to help prevent what can be prevented and reduce the hospital burden. And for that, we certainly are seeing recognition, and of course our teams are very, very motivated to ensure that we do what we can while waiting, of course, for our vaccines to come. And I do note that, of course, you know, there have been various trust reports and trust surveys, and it is definitely a very positive sign that you know, when people are asked expectations about business, and you know, in fact, business is now being seen as one of the most trusted institutions. So, you know, we really do, again, need to make sure that this continues, and we can continue to be recognized for bringing science and innovation to help solve these phenomenal public health challenges.
Quick question from Michael Naylor. What can be learned from the ultra-fast development of these vaccines that could be transferred to pharma and biotech R&D more widely to accelerate programs and improve efficiency? Now, that's a big question. If there's one thing you could pull out, Sean, what would you say?
It's a bit like what I was saying earlier, that you can do this, and I believe you can repeat it. And I think it's, you know, to Monika's point, you know, it may not be a development cycle of 10 months, but you know, the fact that we've announced, or Pfizer have announced our collaboration this morning, delivering a flu vaccine prior to 2025 to the market, and it's 2020 now, and it's not yet in the clinic, shows how this COVID vaccine pandemic and the development of vaccines has begun to change mindsets. You know, as a biotech, we always try and do things differently and quickly. And it's really, really, really great to see, others taking up the bat who are much larger and have much more resources, and it can potentially help everyone, as Monika was saying, to bring innovation earlier to those people who are suffering and need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've more or less out of time. I hope people on my panel won't mind if I throw them a question, which is more sort of self-interest for an article I'm writing on the sort of soaring number of vaccinations, which, as you probably know, we just passed the 100 million vaccination milestone. How many doses do you think will have gone into people in 6 months or a year's time? I mean, we've seen the figures of orders, etc. I mean, what would you sort of, anyone willing to hazard a guess? Don't have to, but I mean, it's going to be billions, isn't it, by this time next year?
I mean, Clive, we set out a goal ourselves in March of providing vaccine to anyone who wanted it, and I think the whole industry is gearing up production with the various technologies to do that. And for those who want it, in the second half of the year, there'll be sufficient vaccine available
in the wealthier countries.
That really, yes, globally, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not just talking about all of us on this call and all the usual suspects, but you've got to look at China as well and what China.
Yes.
Together, I think that there will be billions of doses available for those who want it.
Would you agree, Su-Peing?
I think that we do have to continue to work not just on actually getting the doses available, but also to make sure that the implementation campaigns, there's a lot of work to actually get shots into arms, and not to underestimate that, and helping to bolster vaccine confidence, so that, as Sean was saying, for those who want to get it, we need to make sure that people do want to get it, and as many as possible, because that's the only way we can get enough herd immunity, and that's going to be the only way that we can bring our lives back to some sense of normality with this pandemic. So I certainly think that we will have to continue to work across industry and across the entire ecosystem to make sure not only can we get the vaccines made, delivered, but ultimately for people to accept and to receive the vaccines.
Thanks very much. I'm going to leave the last word to you, Monika, because our time really is up now. It doesn't have to be on this. What's your sort of one learning point from what you've experienced over the last year working on COVID?
Yes, as I said, we've accomplished things that we didn't know we had in us to accomplish. And that's probably one of the lessons we need to take forward, that we have the capacity to do more. And when possible and when appropriate, we should strive for that. We should strive for getting products developed faster. That will take courage, and it will take more investment and risk. But when the unmet need warrants it, that's what we should strive for. So I would say, we can do more. I think that's the main lesson from last year.
Thank you. That's a very good final note, Monika. We can do more. I'm going to thank Sean, Su-Peing, and Monika for your very, very interesting and, to me, fascinating, actually, answers to the questions. Thanks to the audience and for your questions. And I'm going to hand back to Josh now. And thank you, Josh, for organising this session. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you, Clive. Well, yeah, a huge thank you to Clive and to Su-Peing and to Monika and Sean for joining, and as I mentioned before, joining from different time zones and making this work live. Thank you all for your questions, and I guess more widely, thank you to all of your companies and teams, and indeed all the other pharma and biotech companies who have been doing everything that they can to get us out of this pandemic, and I guess hopefully perhaps with a bit of luck, we might be able to meet in person next year for the World Congress in February if everything goes to plan. A long way to go, obviously, but that's what we're hopeful for. Please do keep your comments and questions coming in. Thanks to Mark for his thanks to the panel. Said it was a fascinating discussion. Keep the conversation going. We are back in just under 10 minutes now with our next session focusing on partnering for broad platform companies. But for now, yeah, a huge thank you to all of our panelists and our audience, and see you again shortly.